For thousands of years the Galactic Council protected one secret more valuable than any weapon, any fleet, any empire. A secret so powerful that even speaking about it was forbidden, and that secret was Warp Core Omega, a device that could bend reality and jump across galaxies in seconds, something so advanced that even the oldest species in the universe feared it. And because of that fear the Council created the strongest law in history. No species could see it, touch it, learn from it, or study it, and the Council added one more rule, a rule spoken in whispers and carved into the highest archives. Humans must never go near warp tech, because in the Council's eyes humans were too curious, too clever, too unpredictable, too dangerous, always asking questions, always taking things apart, always trying to understand the impossible. So the Council hid Warp Core Omega on a secure station far from Earth, guarded by unbreakable walls, endless scanners, elite soldiers, and the most advanced security systems ever built, a fortress floating in silent space, untouched for centuries. But everything changed one cold and quiet cycle when the station's scanners detected something strange. A flicker, a disturbance, a shadow moving across the halls, and then the alarms began to blink, not loud, not screaming, just a subtle red light pulsing like a heartbeat. And the security officers rushed to check the core chamber, their hearts pounding, their hands shaking. But when the doors slid open they froze in horror because the chamber was empty. The warp core was gone, missing, vanished, not destroyed but stolen. And the strangest part was not the missing device but the room around it. No explosion marks, no broken locks, no burned metal, no damaged wires, nothing. It was as clean as it had been since the day it was built, as if someone had simply walked in and carried the most powerful object in the galaxy out like a suitcase. And when the guards checked the floor they found only one thing, a single trail of footprints leading in and out. Footprints the scanners identified instantly as human. The news spread like wildfire across the galaxy, racing through star networks and encrypted channels. And when the Council heard it they did not shout, they did not argue, they did not speak at all. They simply stared at the glowing report in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were reading, because humans should not have been able to breach the station. The entry codes were classified at the highest level. The security systems were designed to detect any life form. The doors were locked with quantum encryption, and even if a thief somehow got inside, they should not have been able to lift or activate the warp core, because the device was protected by a failsafe system that required non-human DNA to remain stable. So nothing about this made sense, nothing followed the laws of science or logic, and the Council members began to whisper their deepest fear. If humans had touched warp tech, if they had learned even a small piece of it, if they had found a way to take it apart and study it, then the galaxy could change forever. Within hours an emergency broadcast rang through the Council chambers, alien voices rising in panic, asking the same questions again and again. How did humans know about the core? How did they get inside the station? How did they escape without detection? And beneath all those questions was a darker one no one dared to say out loud. What will humans do now that they have the most powerful device in existence? And in the shadows of the chamber a senior counselor finally whispered the unspoken truth. We always feared their curiosity. Because humans had always been different from other species. Humans asked why when others followed rules. Humans explored when others stayed safe. Humans investigated when others looked away, and that curiosity was what made them dangerous. Not because they wanted power, but because they wanted understanding, and understanding could change everything. Across distant worlds ordinary people gasped in terror as the news spread. Parents whispered fearful words to their children. Soldiers prepared their fleets. Rulers fortified their borders, and rumors took over the galaxy. Some said humans planned to build a secret empire. Some said humans would open a portal to another universe. Some said humans would break all laws of space and time. And the wildest rumor claimed that humans had not stolen the warp core for themselves but had destroyed it to stop the Council's control, and no one knew which rumor was true. But everyone agreed on one thing: Earth's silence was terrifying. Because Earth did not deny the theft, did not explain it, did not defend itself, it simply went dark, no transmissions. No broadcasts, no signals, nothing. Like a storm gathering behind a wall. Silent but deadly. Meanwhile deep underground beneath Earth's surface, far below oceans and mountains, in a hidden bunker that no alien scanner had ever detected, a small room glowed with white light, and inside that room stood 3 human engineers and one silent device resting on a metal table. The stolen warp core Omega, its surface shining like liquid glass, humming with a faint pulse like a sleeping heart, and the engineers stared at it with wide eyes, not afraid, not excited, but stunned, because they had done the impossible. They had walked into a fortress no one could breach, taken the most advanced machine ever built, and brought it home without being seen, and the lead engineer finally spoke in a quiet voice, "We did it." But his voice trembled not with pride, but with disbelief, because even he didn't fully understand how they had succeeded, and as the other 2 stared at the core they didn't cheer, didn't celebrate, didn't laugh, they just stood silently, their breaths shallow, because the weight of what they held was heavier than any star, and then the lead engineer whispered something even stranger, "Now we take it apart." And that sentence hung in the room like a thunderclap, because taking apart Warp Core Omega was unthinkable, impossible, forbidden, and dangerous. But the humans did not hesitate, because humans were not like the Council. Humans did not fear answers, they searched for them. Back in the Council chambers, alarms flickered again, scanning the stolen station footage, and the most shocking discovery yet made every leader freeze in horror. The humans who stole the core had not used teleporters, advanced tools, or weapons. They had simply walked through the walls, their bodies phasing through solid metal like ghosts, leaving no trace, no damage, no sound, and the Council screamed in panic, "Humans do not have that technology." But the images did not lie, and the truth was more terrifying than any theory, because if humans had found a way to bypass matter itself, then nothing in the galaxy could stop them, no barrier, no shield, no fortress, and one counselor whispered with shaking hands, "If they can walk through walls, they can walk into any world." And that sentence spread fear like a virus. On the outer rim of space, alien fleets began to assemble, warships powering up, commanders shouting orders, soldiers loading weapons, preparing for a war no one wanted but everyone feared, and across the galaxy billions held their breath. Because if humans had mastered warp tech, then no planet was safe, no empire secure, no future predictable, and the tiniest sparks of paranoia began to burn in powerful minds, whispering that humanity might not only understand the core, they might improve it. And if they did, they could become unstoppable. But on Earth, in that silent bunker, the humans did not think about war or power or conquest. They thought about knowledge, about discovery, about solving mysteries that had haunted the universe for millennia. And as their hands hovered over the core, one of them whispered the first question that would change everything. "What if this is only a prototype?" And the other engineer answered with a quiet breath, "What if we can build something better?" And those words were the real beginning, the first spark of a fire the galaxy could never put out, because humans had not stolen Warp Core Omega to use it. They had stolen it to understand it, and once humans understand something, they never give it back the same way. And far above Earth, watching from satellites and silent stations, the stars themselves seemed to tremble as the universe realized a truth too late. The greatest danger was never that humans touched warp tech. The greatest danger was that humans would take it apart, learn its secrets, and bring it back stronger than ever. And as the galaxy trembled in fear, humanity took its first quiet breath in a journey that would rewrite every rule of space, time, and power, because somehow, against every law, every limit, every lock, humans had done the impossible, and the universe would never be the same again. The moment the Galactic Council confirmed the impossible, that Warp Core Omega was gone and human footprints were the only evidence left, the entire chamber fell into a suffocating silence. A silence so heavy it felt like oxygen had been stolen from the room, and every leader, every ambassador, every commander stared at the holographic screen with wide, terrified eyes because nothing in history had ever been this shocking, this confusing, this dangerous, and one trembling official finally whispered what everyone was thinking. Humans should not be able to do this. And those words rippled through the chamber like a chill sliding down a spine, because humans were supposed to be restricted, monitored, controlled, treated like a curious but harmless species, a species that tinkered with small machines and explored tiny corners of space, not a species capable of breaching the most secure station in the galaxy and stealing the most powerful device ever created. And as fear spread, dozens of alien voices rose at once, shouting in panic, accusing each other, demanding answers, demanding action, their fear twisting into anger, into paranoia, into something wild and Uncontrollable because the unknown is the most terrifying weapon of all. Outside the chamber, the news spread across star systems at light speed, flashing across giant screens, streaming into homes, buzzing through military bases, and species across the galaxy shook with dread, civilians clutching each other, children crying, soldiers gripping their weapons tighter, and whispers filled the air, whispers that grew louder and darker. Humans stole warp power. Humans are planning something. Humans are hiding a secret. And those whispers became rumors, and those rumors became fear, and that fear began to feel like a storm with no sky, no rain, just pressure, heavy and endless, crushing everyone under it. And on world after world, leaders called for lockdowns, for curfews, for checkpoints, as if hiding behind walls could stop whatever humanity had just awakened. Meanwhile, fleets across the galaxy roared to life, warships powering up, cannons humming, shields rising, entire armadas assembling in panic because the Council had one horrifying thought. If humans learned how Warp Core Omega worked, even a little, even by accident, they could travel anywhere, appear anywhere, strike anywhere, wipe out any fleet before anyone could even blink, and the most terrifying part wasn't the potential destruction. It was that humans had remained completely silent. No message, no broadcast, no demand, no explanation, nothing, just a cold, empty quiet that echoed louder than any threat. And the silence made every species feel like they were standing in a dark room with an unseen predator breathing somewhere close. Back in the council chamber, a hologram flickered to life showing Earth. Small, blue, calm, beautiful. And yet that image filled every leader with dread because no scanners could see inside Earth anymore. No transmissions could enter. No signals could leave. It was like a wall of shadows had wrapped around the planet, hiding everything, blocking everything, and the council screamed in confusion. Why is Earth dark? Why are they silent? But no one had an answer, and that missing answer felt like a crack forming in the heart of the galaxy. While fear grew beyond control, the council summoned a special intelligence officer, a historian who had studied humans for decades, a thin, quiet man with tired eyes who stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling as he spoke. You fear humans because you think they want power, but that is not what makes them dangerous. And the chamber fell still, every eye locked on him, and he continued, humans are dangerous because they ask questions, because they take things apart, because they learn. And then he said the sentence that pierced every soul in the room. They did not steal Warp Core Omega to use it. They stole it to understand it. And the chamber erupted into chaos, leaders shouting, if they understand it, they can replicate it. If they replicate it, they can surpass us. If they surpass us, they can rule us. And the panic turned into pure terror. On distant planets, ordinary families sat around screens watching emergency broadcasts, faces pale, hands shaking, and one child asked her mother in a small, frightened voice, "Are the humans coming here?" And the mother didn't know how to answer, because the truth was she didn't know, no one knew, and that uncertainty was worse than any confirmed attack, because the mind fills silence with nightmares, and the galaxy was drowning in nightmares now. In military academies, young cadets whispered nervously, did humans build a fleet? Did humans create a weapon? Did humans unlock God-level power? And their instructors could only stare at the floor, unable to calm them, because even they were terrified, and that terror spread like fire in dry grass, reaching every star, every mind, every heart. And while the galaxy trembled, Earth remained completely, painfully silent, as if holding its breath, as if waiting, as if watching, and that silence was not peaceful. It was suffocating, unnerving, terrifying. Because silence meant humans were not reacting emotionally, not panicking, not begging, not threatening. They were thinking, calculating, planning. And a species that steals the most powerful device in the galaxy without leaving a scratch is not a species acting out of fear. It is a species acting with purpose. In the deepest shadows of the council chamber, the historian whispered one last message, barely audible but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. If humans took the core apart, they will not return it the same way. And those words hit every leader like a cold blade because they realized something chilling. Humans were not reckless. They were not impulsive. They were not loud. They were patient, precise, and curious. And curiosity could evolve into something far more dangerous than war. Back on Earth, in a quiet city far from the bunker, an old man sat alone in front of a silent screen, staring out at the night sky, and he whispered to himself, "They fear us because they don't understand us." His voice soft and sad, because even though the galaxy was panicking, humanity had not changed overnight. Humans were still human. Messy, emotional, hopeful, scared, brilliant. And that mix was exactly what made them unpredictable. And unpredictability is what terrified the galaxy most. As fleets moved, as armies prepared, as worlds locked down, the universe came to one terrifying realization. Humans were not shouting, humans were not threatening, humans were not declaring war, and somehow that was worse than any weapon. Because silence meant control, silence meant confidence, silence meant power. And in that eerie, breathless silence, the galaxy finally understood the truth that would keep them awake for generations. Humans had touched the impossible, humans had taken the forbidden, and humans were not afraid. Deep beneath Earth's surface, far below oceans and mountains where no alien scanner could ever reach, a silent elevator descended into darkness, carrying the three humans who had stolen Warp Core Omega. And as the metal doors opened into a massive underground chamber glowing with pale white light, the air felt thick and heavy, not with fear, but with something deeper, responsibility, a weight so enormous it made their hearts ache. Because they knew the entire galaxy was panicking, billions were terrified, fleets were mobilizing, leaders were screaming, and yet here they were, standing in a quiet room with the most powerful device in existence resting on a simple metal table like an ancient heart waiting to beat again. And none of them spoke at first, they just stared at the core, its smooth silver surface pulsing softly like it was alive, like it was breathing, and for a long moment the only sound in the room was their own shaky breathing. Because even though they had done the impossible, they didn't feel proud, they didn't feel victorious, they felt small, fragile, human. The lead engineer, Dr. Kieran Holt, a man with tired eyes and hands that trembled from sleepless nights, stepped closer, and as he stared at the warp core his throat tightened because he remembered something painful, something that lived deep in his memory like a scar. His father's voice from years ago, telling him that curiosity was humanity's greatest strength and greatest curse, because humans never stopped asking why, never stopped pushing limits. And sometimes that curiosity led to miracles. But sometimes it led to heartbreak, and as Kieran reached out a shaking hand to touch the surface of the core he whispered, "What have we started?" And his voice cracked with fear and wonder at the same time, because he didn't know if they had opened a door to a new age or a door to disaster. Beside him stood Mara Quinn, the youngest of the team, a brilliant engineer with gentle eyes and a soft voice. Someone who had joined the project because she believed learning could save lives, not end them. But now she felt tears burning behind her eyes because she knew the galaxy believed humans had stolen the core to build power, to build weapons, to build dominance, and that lie cut deeper than she expected. Because humans weren't monsters, they weren't conquerors, they were explorers, dreamers, inventors, and as she stared at the glowing device she whispered, "They think we want war, but we just want answers," and a single tear rolled down her cheek, not from fear, but from sadness, sadness that billions of lives were trembling in terror because of something humanity never intended to harm anyone with. The third member, Elias Rourke, a quiet man who rarely spoke, stood with his arms wrapped around himself like he was holding his heart together, and behind his calm expression was a storm of guilt, because he remembered the moment they left the station, slipping through walls like ghosts, carrying the core while alarms stayed silent, and instead of feeling triumphant he felt sick, because he knew what the galaxy would think, and he whispered under his breath, "We didn't steal it, we saved it." And he meant it, because right before taking the core he had seen a hidden code flashing across the station monitors. An unstable energy reading, a warning buried deep in the system, a sign that Warp Core Omega was failing, unstable, dangerous, capable of exploding with force strong enough to tear a star apart. And he knew that if the Council kept it running, if they tried to activate it again, it could destroy entire worlds. And they couldn't let that happen, not to humans, not to anyone. And that was the truth that no one in the galaxy knew. In the bunker's quiet hum, Kieran finally broke the silence with a trembling whisper, "We have to take it apart." And those 6 words hung in the air like thunder, because taking apart Warp Core Omega wasn't just a scientific challenge. It was a decision that could change the fate of every living soul in the universe, and Mara flinched, her eyes wide, her voice shaking. "If we damage it, we could kill everyone." And Kieran nodded slowly, pain in his eyes. "If we don't, the galaxy could burn." And Elias closed his eyes because the truth hurt. This wasn't about power or ambition or pride. This was about survival, and humanity had been given a terrible choice. Risk everything to understand the core or risk everything by leaving it untouched. Kieran placed both hands on the table, leaning forward, shoulders heavy with emotions he couldn't name, and he whispered, "The Council hid this from us. They hid it from everyone. They feared what we would do if we learned the truth." And Mara asked softly, "What truth?" And Kieran's voice cracked as he answered, "That the core is unstable, and they've been using it anyway." And that sentence broke something inside Mara, because she remembered her sister, stationed in a colony near a warp network, a colony that mysteriously vanished years ago, and suddenly her eyes filled with tears as a sickening thought clawed into her chest. What if warp instability had killed her sister? What if the Council had known? What if they had done nothing? And she covered her mouth with her shaking hand, tears falling silently as she whispered, "They let people die." Elias stepped forward, voice quiet but filled with a pain so heavy it trembled. "We're not stealing the future, we're trying to save it." And Kieran nodded, tears glistening in his eyes because he knew the truth better than anyone. Humanity didn't take the core to start war. They took it because they refused to let an unstable machine wipe out worlds, and the galaxy would never believe that. The galaxy would see only fear, only danger, only threat, and that misunderstanding hurt more than anything, because humanity wasn't cruel, humanity wasn't heartless, humanity cared too much, and caring had led them into this impossible moment. While the bunker filled with quiet, painful emotion, the outside world burned with panic, fleets mobilizing, worlds locking down, billions whispering the same terrified question, what will humans do next? But Earth remained silent, not because they didn't care, but because they cared so deeply that speaking now could shatter everything, and in that silence Kieran finally straightened, wiping his face, and whispered with shaking resolve, "We take it apart, we learn, we fix it, we give it back." And Mara stared at him with wide, glassy eyes, whispering, "They will never trust us." And Kieran answered softly, voice filled with sorrow, "Maybe trust doesn't matter, maybe survival does." And as the three humans reached for their tools, hands trembling, hearts breaking under the weight of their choice, the warp core pulsed again, a soft heartbeat of light, as if it knew its fate was changing, and the room filled with a glow that felt warm and alive, and in that moment humanity crossed a line the galaxy could never erase. Not a line of war, not a line of power, but a line of understanding, because humans weren't trying to control the core, they were trying to save everyone from it. They didn't know if they would succeed. They didn't know if they would survive. They didn't know if the galaxy would ever forgive them. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They could not walk away. Inside the silent bunker the air felt tight and cold as Dr. Kieran Holt loosened the first bolt from Warp Core Omega, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the tool, and Mara Quinn stood beside him, her breath trapped in her chest, watching the impossible happen inch by inch as the smooth metallic shell of the most powerful device in the galaxy began to open. And Elias Rourke monitored the energy levels with wide, terrified eyes, whispering updates under his breath like prayers, because every number on his screen represented life or death, and when the final bolt came free a soft hum filled the room, a vibration that slid through their bones like a tremor of fate, and for a split second all three froze, hearts pounding so violently it hurt, because they knew if they were wrong, if the core was unstable, if they made even one microscopic mistake, the bunker, the planet, maybe the solar system could vanish in a blinding flash, and yet instead of exploding the core slowly unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing its inner heart. A swirling sphere of blue energy suspended in midair, pulsing like a heartbeat, fragile, beautiful, terrifying, and for a moment they forgot to breathe as Mara whispered, voice trembling, "It's alive." And Kieran's throat tightened because she wasn't wrong. The energy inside the core felt organic, conscious, aware. And Elias whispered shakily, "This isn't a machine, it's something else." And the realization hit them like a lightning strike. Warp Core Omega wasn't just technology, it was a living system. The energy pulsed again, brighter this time, and Mara stumbled back as memories flashed through her mind. Her sister's smile, her laughter, her face fading into static when the colony vanished, and suddenly the weight of what they were doing crushed her chest. Because if warp technology was alive, if it had feelings or awareness, then every unstable pulse, every failure, every collapse might not have been mechanical. It might have been pain, suffering, panic, And she pressed her shaking hand too. Her heart, whispering through tears, maybe the core wasn't breaking, maybe it was crying. And Kieran's eyes widened, because the energy fluctuations he had studied, the unpredictable surges, the strange signals, could have been messages, warnings, screams, and he felt a tear slide down his cheek as he whispered, "We didn't just save the galaxy from destruction, we saved this." And Elias swallowed hard because the truth was more emotional than any of them had expected. They weren't taking apart a weapon. They were dissecting a wounded life. But the revelation didn't stop there, because as Kieran carefully scanned the exposed inner structure, he saw something that made his knees go weak. Etched along the inner ring, almost invisible, were microscopic symbols, patterns too complex for any known alien language, patterns that repeated like code, like instructions, like someone had left a message hidden inside the core, and Kieran's breath hitched as he leaned closer, whispering, "These markings, they're human," and Mara's head snapped. Up, eyes wide with disbelief, "That's impossible." And Elias' voice cracked as he whispered, "Humans didn't build this, did they?" And Kieran shook his head because the markings weren't words or letters, they were mathematical signatures, sequences identical to ancient human equations discovered on Earth long before humanity ever reached space. Equations older than recorded history, and a cold truth sank into their chests. Warp Core Omega wasn't just hidden from humans, it was connected to them, linked to them, maybe even created by them long before the Council existed, long before Earth fell silent, long before the galaxy ever feared humanity. Mara's tears fell faster now, dripping onto the floor as she whispered, "The Council didn't hide this because they feared what we might do. They hid it because they feared what we already are." And Elias clenched his fists as guilt and anger twisted inside him, because if humans had ancient ties to warp technology, if humanity once understood secrets the galaxy had forgotten, then the Council had stolen not just a device. They had stolen humanity's history, humanity's identity, humanity's truth. And Kieran wiped his face with trembling hands, whispering, "They lied to us, they lied to everyone." And the betrayal cut deeper than any blade, because while the galaxy painted humans as reckless thieves, humanity might have been the original creators, the first explorers, the lost pioneers of warp travel. Outside the bunker, Earth remained dark and silent, but inside the bunker something brighter than light was awakening. Hope, fragile and trembling, but real, because now the humans understood why the galaxy was terrified, why the Council passed laws, why they banned human access, because humans weren't just capable of understanding warp tech, they were born from it. Then the core flickered violently, energy spiking, alarms flashing red, and Elias shouted, "It's destabilizing." And panic surged through the room as the pulsing sphere cracked with blinding white light, and Mara screamed, clutching Kieran's arm as waves of unstable energy rippled outward, shaking the floor, rattling every bolt in the walls, and for one horrifying moment they thought this was the end, that their curiosity had triggered a galaxy-ending collapse. But Kieran acted through tears, through terror, slamming his hand onto the stabilizer control panel and pouring every calculation he had into a manual override, whispering, come on, stay with us." Like he was begging a dying friend to hold on, and Mara grabbed his other arm, steadying him even as her own legs trembled, whispering through sobs, "Please don't die, please." And Elias held the energy dampener in place with his bare hands even though the radiation burned his palms raw, gritting his teeth as he screamed, "We're not letting anything else die." And then, silence. The core stabilized, shrinking into a small, steady sphere of soft blue light, quiet and calm like a sleeping child, and the three humans collapsed to the floor, gasping, sweating, crying, not from pain but from relief, because they had saved it, saved the core, saved themselves, saved the galaxy from a catastrophe no one else even knew was coming. And Kieran wiped his face with shaking fingers, whispering in a broken voice, "We didn't destroy it, we healed it." And Mara pressed her forehead to the floor, sobbing softly because the realization was overwhelming. The galaxy feared humanity would break the universe, but humanity might be the only species capable of fixing it. Elias stared at his burned hands, tears streaming down his face, whispering, "We saved something alive." And in that quiet moment they finally understood that they weren't thieves, they weren't criminals, they weren't rebels. They were protectors, caretakers, guardians of a truth the galaxy wasn't ready to face. And as the core glowed gently, almost affectionately, like it recognized them, like it trusted them. Kieran whispered the sentence that would change everything. "We can build a better one." And Mara lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes wide and shining, whispering, "A human warp core." And Elias nodded slowly, voice trembling, "Not for power, for life." In that glowing bunker, 3 broken humans made a silent promise, not to conquer the galaxy, but to save it, to fix what was broken, to restore what was lost, to return something greater than what they took. While the bunker deep beneath Earth glowed softly with the healed warp core, far across the galaxy the council chamber shook with panic so intense it felt like the air itself was cracking, alarms flickering red across holographic screens, reports pouring in from every sector, and terrified voices filling the room as commanders shouted that Earth had gone completely dark, that human communication was offline, that no scanners could see inside the planet, like Earth had wrapped itself in a cloak of shadows, and fleets everywhere were reporting the same terrifying truth. No one knew what humanity was building, no one knew what humanity was planning, and that ignorance made every heartbeat in the chamber tremble with fear. Because silence meant control, silence meant secrets, silence meant danger, and a single sentence appeared on the main display, written in cold white letters. "Warp signature detected near Earth. 3x stronger than the original." And when the message flashed across the room, every council member froze, their blood turning cold. Because if that reading was real, if humans had activated anything related to warp energy, it meant one horrifying possibility. Humans weren't just studying the core, they were improving it. The Supreme Chancellor slammed her trembling hand on the table, voice cracking with fear as she shouted, "Mobilize every fleet. We cannot let humans activate warp technology." And the chamber exploded into chaos, ambassadors screaming, generals arguing, worlds pledging their armies, because the council believed something deadly, that humans had stolen the core not to understand it, but to weaponize it, to build a system that could teleport fleets into enemy worlds, to strike without warning, to conquer entire star systems in seconds, and paranoia spread like fire, burning logic, burning reason, burning truth, and soon every species, every government, every military voice was whispering the same word, war. Across the galaxy, screens flashed emergency warnings, people rushed into shelters, children clung to their parents, and fear wrapped entire civilizations in a suffocating grip, because the unknown is the cruelest enemy, and humans had become the definition of unknown. And on one distant world a little alien boy pointed at the glowing news feed and asked his mother, voice small and shaking, "Why are the humans doing this?" And the mother held him close, trying to steady her own trembling breath. As she whispered, "Because they are dangerous," even though she didn't truly know, even though no one truly knew. But fear doesn't wait for truth. Fear creates its own. And in millions of hearts humanity transformed from curious explorers into a nightmare species capable of tearing reality apart. Then the Council released the most devastating message in galactic history, a public broadcast declaring humanity a level red threat, the highest danger classification ever recorded, branding humans as unstable, unpredictable, and hostile, declaring that Earth was now under full surveillance and potential military containment. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy united under one idea, not peace, not exploration, but fear of humans, and fleets of colossal warships formed a tightening ring around Earth's borders, engines rumbling like thunder, weapons charging, shields raised, thousands of cannons glowing with deadly light, and in a single moment billions of terrified civilians watched as their governments prepared to strike humanity down before humanity could strike them first. Inside the bunker, however, the 3 engineers knew nothing of the chaos outside, but they could feel something shifting in their chests, a pressure, a sadness, a pain that hummed beneath their ribs as if the universe itself was trembling, and Kieran paused mid-calculation, staring at the glowing core with a haunted expression as he whispered, "They don't understand what we're doing," and Mara wiped her cheeks, voice breaking as she whispered, "They think we want war," and Elias stared at his burned hands, voice trembling, "But all we want is to make sure no one dies again." And the pain of that truth twisted inside them, because even though they were trying to protect the galaxy believed they were preparing to destroy it, and that misunderstanding felt like a knife cutting straight into the heart of humanity. Then Earth's defense network flickered awake, satellite shields rising, silent towers powering up, and deep space scanners detected something shocking. Dozens of unknown ships approaching Earth at high speed, weapons hot, engines roaring, and the bunker screens lit up with a violent pulse, showing the council fleets closing in like wolves around a wounded animal, and Mara gasped, her voice cracking in fear, "They're not here to talk." And Kieran's chest tightened painfully because he knew what the fleet saw: Earth in silence, Earth in darkness, Earth hiding something powerful. And he whispered, voice shattered, "They think we're building a weapon." And Elias slammed his fists on the console, shouting through tears, "We're trying to save them." But the galaxy couldn't hear them. The galaxy didn't want to hear them. And then the council sent one final transmission, broadcast across every star, every screen, every world. A cold threat wrapped in official language. Earth must surrender the warp core immediately or face military action. And the words hit like a thunderbolt, because they weren't just a warning. They were a countdown to war, and billions watched in breathless silence, waiting for Earth to respond, waiting for humans to speak, waiting for any sign of surrender or explanation. But Earth stayed silent. Not because they wanted war. Not because they were defying the galaxy. But because the humans in the bunker were crying, overwhelmed by the weight of a truth the council couldn't see. If they surrendered the core in its unstable form, the galaxy might be destroyed, worlds might be erased, colonies might vanish just like Mara's sister's home. And they couldn't let that happen, no matter the cost, no matter the fear, no matter the danger. Mara sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "They're going to kill us for trying to save them." And Kieran knelt beside her, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder, whispering through his own tears, "We can't stop now." And Elias stared at the approaching fleets on the screen, eyes burning with grief as he whispered, "If we quit, more worlds will die." And in that unbearable moment the three humans realized something heartbreaking and powerful. They weren't just fighting for humanity, they were fighting for everyone, even those who hated them, even those who feared them, even those preparing to destroy them outside. The fleet primed its cannons. Inside, three exhausted humans wiped their tears and kept working. And in that fragile, painful silence between fear and hope, the galaxy stood on the edge of something irreversible, something unstoppable, something humanity never wanted but could no longer avoid. Because the Council wasn't preparing to negotiate. The Council was preparing to fire. The Council fleets surrounded Earth like a tightening noose, thousands of warships forming a glowing ring in the darkness. Weapons charged, engines burning, every cannon pointed at the blue planet that had once been ignored, dismissed, underestimated. And as those ships hovered in cold silence, billions of alien eyes watched from across the galaxy, waiting, trembling, terrified of what would happen next. Because one command, one misunderstanding, one spark could start a war that would swallow every world, every species, every future. And inside the bunker deep below Earth's crust, the three humans felt the weight of that danger pressing against their chests like a crushing stone, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to stay steady, because they knew the truth. The Council believed Earth was building a weapon, and if humanity didn't respond soon, the fleets would fire. Kieran stood frozen in front of the screen, staring at the sea of red warning markers showing the enemy ships closing in, his face pale, his hands trembling, his heart banging against his ribs like it wanted to escape his body. And for the first time since this mission began, he felt true fear. Not fear of death, not fear of failure, but fear that he might be responsible for ending everything he was trying to protect. And his voice cracked as he whispered, "We didn't mean for this," because he remembered being a boy staring at the stars with awe, dreaming of exploration, discovery, connection, not war, not destruction, not this unbearable loneliness that came from being hated by the entire galaxy. And he felt tears burn behind his eyes as he choked out, "We never wanted to be the enemy." Mara stood beside him, one hand pressed against the glowing core, her fingers shaking as she felt its soft pulse beneath her skin, and she remembered her sister. The laughter, the warmth, the memories that now felt like fading photographs. And for a moment she closed her eyes and whispered. She died because they didn't listen. Because when her sister's colony vanished, the Council ignored the warnings, ignored the unstable warp signals, ignored the truth, and now, once again, the Council wasn't listening, wasn't seeing the danger, wasn't understanding that the core was never meant to be a weapon. It was a wounded life, needing repair, needing care, needing someone to hear its silent pain, and Mara felt her heart crack all over again as she whispered, "If we return it broken, more families will lose someone they love." and a tear rolled down her cheek, heavy and slow, because she wasn't just fighting for humanity. She was fighting so no one else would feel the emptiness she had lived with for years. Elias stared at the screens displaying the growing fleet. His burned hands curled into fists so tight his nails dug into his skin. And he remembered the moment he saw the hidden warning in the original core, the spike that showed instability, the signal that meant catastrophe, and he remembered the horror of realizing that the Council had kept using it anyway, gambling with innocent lives, gambling with worlds, gambling with families. And his voice shook with pain as he whispered, "They fear us, but they were the ones willing to kill entire planets." And that truth twisted inside him like a knife, because even now as humans tried to prevent disaster, the galaxy prepared to destroy Earth without asking a single question. And Elias felt something inside him break. Not anger, not hatred, but heartbreak that humanity had become the villain in a story where they were trying to save everyone. Then the bunker alarms blared, screens flashing with a piercing message. Council fleet weapons locked, 60 seconds to firing, and the words hit them like a punch to the chest, knocking the breath out of their lungs, and Mara gasped, gripping Kieran's arm, her voice shaking violently as she cried, "They're going to fire." And Kieran staggered back, eyes wide, whispering, "No, they can't, they'll kill millions." And Elias slammed his palms on the console, voice raw with agony. "They don't care, they'd rather destroy us than believe us." And that realization felt like betrayal carved into bone, because the galaxy that feared humanity's curiosity was about to commit the very destruction they accused humans of. Kieran wiped his eyes with shaking fingers, forcing himself to breathe, forcing himself to think, and he whispered in a broken voice, "If they fire, we have to protect Earth." And Mara's voice cracked in horror. "With what? We don't have weapons." And Kieran shook his head, whispering, "We have the core." And Elias stared at him in stunned disbelief, his voice trembling. "You want to activate it? But the new design isn't ready. If we use it now, it could tear space apart." And Kieran nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face, because he knew the truth. Earth had no defense, no army, no shield strong enough to stop 1,000 warships, and the only chance they had, their only hope, was the unstable, half-finished warp core glowing softly in the center of the room. Mara's voice broke into sobs as she whispered, "If we activate it now, we might die." And Kieran's voice cracked as he answered, "If we don't, everyone dies." And the words tore through the room like thunder, leaving them shaking, breathless, hearts breaking under the weight of an impossible choice. Save themselves or save the planet. Save their work or save the world. Risk total collapse or accept total destruction. And Elias closed his eyes, tears falling silently as he whispered, "Humanity is alone." And the silence after that sentence was suffocating, crushing, agonizing. Because even though humanity was trying to save the galaxy had already decided humanity was the monster outside. The fleets charged their cannons inside. The core pulsed softly. Then Mara wiped her tears, straightened her shaking shoulders, and whispered, voice trembling but full of painful courage, "If we die protecting them, that's better than living while they burn." And Kieran looked at her, heart breaking with pride and sorrow, and Elias nodded slowly, whispering, "This is who we are." Because humanity had always been willing to risk everything for hope, for life, for others. Kieran reached for the activation panel with a shaking hand, whispering through tears, "Forgive us if we fail." And as his fingers hovered over the switch, the countdown on the screen flashed. 10 seconds, 9, 8, each number a drumbeat of fear, a heartbeat of doom. The second Kieran slammed his trembling palm onto the activation panel. The warp core burst to life with a violent surge of blue light that filled the bunker like a rising star, its energy spiraling outward in a blinding wave that shook the entire underground chamber, rattling walls, cracking metal, sending tools flying as Mara shielded her eyes and Elias staggered back with a gasp. Because the core wasn't humming anymore. It was roaring, its heartbeat growing louder and faster like a terrified creature waking up in panic. And in that terrifying glow Kieran felt his chest seize with the crushing fear that he had doomed them all. That in trying to save Earth he might have just ignited the very destruction they were trying to prevent. And for a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. Because the power radiating from the core wasn't just energy. It was ancient, primal, alive. Outside, the Council fleets detected the energy spike instantly, their scanners flashing red with a piercing alarm that echoed through every warship. Unidentified warp surge, massive destabilization, contact incoming, and commanders froze in horror as the readings climbed higher and higher beyond anything ever recorded, beyond the original warp core Omega, beyond their worst fears, and one commander whispered with trembling lips. They activated it, and panic ripped through the fleets as captains shouted orders, shields went to maximum, and cannons powered up in sheer terror, because they believed humanity had unleashed a superweapon, a catastrophic device that could tear space apart, and some ships even began to retreat, engines shaking with fear, because no one, not even the Council, had expected humans to activate something so powerful, so unstable, so unthinkable. Inside the bunker the floor trembled violently, dust falling from the ceiling as Mara clutched the edge of the console with shaking hands, her voice cracking through tears as she screamed, "Kieran, shut it down. It's too much." But Kieran stared at the core with wide, wet eyes, because he saw something she hadn't. Beneath the violent energy, beneath the chaos, beneath the blinding light, the core's pulse wasn't frantic. It was changing, stabilizing, strengthening, evolving, and he whispered through trembling lips, "No, it's not breaking, it's activating correctly." And Elias stared at him in disbelief, voice shaking, "How can you know that?" And Kieran swallowed hard, tears spilling down his cheeks as he whispered, "Because it's syncing with us." The realization hit him like lightning. The core wasn't reacting to wires or machines or settings. It was reacting to humans, their presence, their minds, their emotions, like it recognized them, like it had been waiting for them. And suddenly the energy stopped expanding outward and instead folded inward, collapsing into a concentrated sphere of pure blue light that hovered above the table, calm, steady, pulsing like a newborn star. And the bunker fell silent except for the soft, gentle thrum of the core, a sound that felt like a breath, a heartbeat, a sigh of relief, and Mara's hands dropped from her face as she whispered, voice trembling with or instead of fear, "It's stable." And Elias stared in stunned disbelief as he whispered, "We didn't fix it, it fixed itself." Far above Earth's surface the impossible happened. Every Council warship suddenly lost lock, their targeting systems short-circuiting, their weapons shutting down as a massive energy barrier formed around Earth. A shimmering blue shield that wrapped the planet like a protective cocoon, not violent, not destructive, not aggressive. It was a barrier of pure warp energy, gentle but impenetrable. And every alien officer froze as their screens flashed the same message again and again. No attack possible, target protected. And a stunned silence spread through the fleets as they realized Earth had not launched a weapon. Earth had shielded itself. Inside the bunker Kieran collapsed to his knees, sobbing with relief as he whispered, "We protected them. We protected everyone." Because the shield didn't just block the fleet's fire, it stabilized the warp network across nearby systems, preventing catastrophic chain reactions, preventing the kind of collapse that destroyed Mara's sister's colony, preventing disaster, and for the first time in days the crushing weight on his chest eased, replaced by a fragile spark of hope. Mara dropped beside him, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking as she whispered, "We didn't destroy the galaxy, we saved it." And Elias leaned against the wall, sliding down slowly, his whole body trembling as he whispered, "They'll never believe us." And his voice cracked, because even though they had prevented an attack, even though they had saved Earth, even though they had stabilized a dying technology, the galaxy still believed humanity was a threat, still believed humanity wanted war, still believed humanity was the enemy, and that heartbreak cut deeper than any wound. Outside the fleet commanders stared at the shimmering shield in stunned silence, unable to fire, unable to advance, unable to understand what they were seeing. Because the shield wasn't offensive, it wasn't harming them. It was simply refusing to be harmed, and after a long, breathless silence one terrified voice whispered across the comms, "Humans didn't attack, they defended." And those words spread through the fleet like a trembling wind, shaking the certainty of every soldier, every captain, every commander, because the galaxy had expected destruction, but humanity had chosen protection. In the bunker Kieran looked up at the core, tears still falling, and whispered, "We can give this back." And Mara's eyes widened as she whispered, "Not as a weapon, but as a gift." And Elias nodded slowly, voice soft but steady, "A safer core, one the galaxy can use without death." And in that moment they realized the true purpose of their mission. They weren't building power, they were building hope, a future where warp travel didn't mean collapse, disaster, or annihilation, a future where no one would lose a sister, a family, a world. But then the comm screen flickered to life, showing a council broadcast, the Chancellor's voice cold and shaking as she declared, "Humanity has activated forbidden technology. Earth is now under siege until surrender is forced." And the words stabbed Kieran's heart like ice, because the galaxy still didn't see their sacrifice, still didn't understand their choice, still didn't know humanity had just saved them all, and Mara covered her mouth, crying silently, because the shield had bought time, but not peace. Elias wiped his eyes, voice trembling but determined as he whispered, "Then we show them." And Kieran nodded slowly, whispering, "We finish the new core." And Mara wiped her tears, standing on shaky legs as she whispered, "And we prove humanity isn't the enemy." They were exhausted. They were heartbroken. They were alone. But they were not defeated. The shield meant they had time. The core meant they had purpose. Their hearts meant they still had hope. And as the blue light pulsed softly through the bunker like the heartbeat of a newborn future, humanity made its greatest promise. The bunker felt impossibly quiet after the shield formed, a silence so heavy it almost felt sacred, like the air itself was holding its breath, and Kieran, Mara, and Elias sat on the cold floor, exhausted, shaking, tears still drying on their cheeks, their hearts bruised from fear and relief, because they had just saved Earth from annihilation, saved billions of innocent lives, saved a future that had almost vanished in fire, but instead of celebration there was only a deep aching stillness inside them, a quiet pain that whispered the same truth over and over. They were still alone, still hunted, still hated, still seen as monsters by the galaxy they had just protected, and that loneliness pressed against their chests like a crushing hand, because what good was saving everyone if no one knew they had been saved? Above, the Council fleets hovered outside the shimmering blue shield, unable to fire, unable to break through, unable to move forward, trapped between fear and confusion, their weapons useless against this strange, gentle barrier that protected Earth without attacking anything, and commanders whispered in trembling voices, "Why would a weapon defend and not destroy?" But no one had an answer, no one understood, and that confusion gnawed at them, because the galaxy had built its fear on the idea that humans were violent, reckless, power-hungry, but the shield was none of those things. It was silent, defensive, compassionate, and that contradiction rattled the foundations of their fear. Inside the bunker, Mara wiped her swollen eyes and stared at the glowing core, her voice soft and trembling as she whispered, "We can't stay silent." Because she knew silence had almost killed them, almost destroyed Earth, almost started a war that could have burned the galaxy, and Kieran breathed shakily, his voice cracking as he whispered, "If we don't speak, they will destroy us anyway." And Elias nodded slowly, pain tightening his throat as he whispered, "But if we speak, they might attack faster," and that impossible choice hung in the air like a blade. Stay silent and die misunderstood, or speak and risk being silenced forever. Then the core pulsed, once, twice, 3 times, like a heartbeat calling to them, and a holographic pattern flickered above it. Lines of code, shapes, symbols, equations spiraling upward in a glowing storm, and Kieran froze, staring with wide eyes because the symbols weren't random. They were instructions, complete, organized, clear, a full blueprint for a new warp core, a safer one, a perfected one, and Mara covered her mouth in shock as she whispered, "It's giving us the design, because the unstable prototype they'd built wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a bridge to something greater, something stable, something game-changing, something the galaxy had never imagined possible." Elias leaned forward, heart pounding, voice trembling with awe. This could let ships travel without collapse. And Kieran whispered, "No more destroyed colonies, no more vanished worlds, no more death." And Mara felt tears stream down her face again, not from fear, but from hope, fragile and bright, because this wasn't just a fix. It was evolution, a new era, a future where warp travel didn't mean risking lives, a future her sister never got to see, and she pressed her shaking hand to her chest as her voice cracked, "We can stop the pain." But the screen flickered again, this time showing a final line of code, something bold, something terrifying, something breathtaking, a jump calculation not for star-to-star travel, not for galaxy to galaxy, but for universe to universe, and the room seemed to tilt as Elias whispered, voice hollow with shock, "This isn't just warp technology, it's gateway technology." And Kieran's breath hitched painfully as he whispered, This could open doorways to places we've never imagined, and Mara trembled as she whispered, we could expand existence itself. Then the bunker console flashed with a priority alert. Council fleet reinforcements arriving. Siege tightening. Time running out. And Kieran felt his heart break all over again. Because they finally had something beautiful, something life-changing, something that could save everyone. And yet they had no way to share it, no way to explain it, no way to prove that humanity wasn't a threat, and Mara sank to the floor, covering her face as she whispered through sobs, they still want to kill us. And Elias's voice cracked with quiet grief. We saved them, and they'll never know. Then Kieran stood, legs weak, voice trembling but steady. We send the design to the council. And Mara looked up in horror, shaking her head. They'll trace the signal. They'll breach the shield. They'll destroy us. And Kieran whispered, eyes wet but determined, if we don't give it to them, more people will die. And Elias stared at him, shattered, whispering, they might kill us for it. And Kieran answered softly, painfully, then we die saving them, because humanity had made their choice. Not revenge, not power, not conquest, but sacrifice. With shaking hands Kieran prepared the transmission, uploading the perfected warp design, the stable core blueprint, the calculations that could save galaxies, and Mara whispered through tears, this is everything. And Elias pressed his burned hand to the console, whispering, this is who we are, and together, with hearts bruised and breaking, they sent the design into the stars. A gift with no demand, no threat, no condition, just hope. Above Earth every council ship received the transmission at the same moment, screens lighting up with the impossible blueprint, and stunned silence filled every warship, every command center, every heart. Because the humans hadn't launched an attack. They had given the galaxy salvation, a safer future, a cure for the very danger the council had been terrified of, and slowly, quietly, fear began to crack. But before anyone could react, the core inside the bunker pulsed one final time, brighter than ever, flooding the room with blinding white light, and the screens flickered with one last message. Warp version 2 ready. Initiate test. And Kieran's eyes widened, breath catching in his throat as he whispered, it built itself, and Mara whispered, it's waiting, and Elias whispered, for someone to fly it. The core wasn't just a blueprint anymore.